Hello, I am Mr. Ellis, one of the special education teachers at the high school. I am happy to be able to explain a little bit of how special education works at the high school level. Many of you may have already met with the counselor to talk about next year's schedule. So, there are three major paths in high school for students with IEPs. And the first one is college prep, and that's if you're planning on going to U of M, MSU, Western, Eastern, Central, or out of state. That is a 4 year college that generally requires some more advanced classes in your junior, senior year. Then there is community college or trade school, and that's going to be like Lansing Community College, Mott College. There might be you might be doing something perhaps in cosmetology. Go to Douglas J. There's trade schools like ITT Tech for welding or electrician. So that is something that's maybe a little more specialized towards a career. And then there's another third general path, and that might be the workforce or the military, and that might be a certificate in a career from Wilson Talent Center. Some of you may have visited that or are about to, and you will do that in your end of sophomore year is where we start planning on Wilson Talent Center. So you don't have to quite worry about that in ninth grade. Now, for the most part, almost all ninth grade students take these four classes. That's English 9, geometry, US history, and physics. And physics is like physical science. There's like magnets and forces and Newton's laws and all that stuff. Some of you will take Spanish or Spanish 2. Some of you will be in an academic lab, which we'll talk more about later. Some of you might have that now. That's like an hour of academic support. Now, special education services at the high school resemble kind of a spectrum. Some students have minimal support, which is we'll talk about in a second, and others have up to 3 or 4 hours a day of support. And most students are kind of in between. So some students minimal, some students have heavy support or strong support. So this table kind of shows what that support might look like, starting with light support all the way on the left here and going all the way to more strong support all the way on the right. So the light support, this student, if a student is receiving light support, they likely have all regular general education classes. That's like the regular English 9, regular US history, regular geometry. They may have speech or social work or teacher consultant service a few times a month. That might be Mrs. Griffiths, or if you see Mr. Gibson right now, uh, or if you see Mrs. Ferris or Mr. Longendike or Mrs. Clark, just a few times a month. That's that end of things, and that will always lead to a high school diploma, and that's what will help you get into a 4 year college or the trade school or LCC, something like that. This next column is a little bit more support. So you may have a co-taught class or an enrichment level class for math or English, and that's going to be a lot more supported than just the regular general classes. Again, you might have speech or social work or teacher consultant service a few times a month. You may also have a resource room hour, and that is the academic lab class. And again, we'll talk about that in a second. So that might be just 1 hour a day of support. And these classes do also lead to a high school diploma, which will then, 4 year college or LCC or the workforce. Now, the next um, sorry about that. The next column is maybe even a little bit more intense support. And this column, they likely have one or more co-taught or enrichment level classes. They likely have a resource room class, that's the academic lab, that's 1 hour a day. They may have modified algebra, that is a special education class, that is a math class that counts for algebra at a much more relaxed and reduced pace. And then they may also, again, have that speech or social work service uh, a few times a month or maybe more. And we're still talking about getting a diploma in this column. So this would be the full-on high school diploma, which again, four-year college or LCC, more likely for LCC or trade school. In this column, that doesn't mean that the four-year college is out of the question. It's just more likely, if we're in getting this level of support, it's more likely that you would be thinking about doing LCC or some sort of trade school or perhaps military. Nothing is guaranteed, so nothing is certain, nothing is locked in. And then the final column, oh, which totally just escaped me there. All right. So then the final column, this is where we have a little bit more, the strongest support really that we have at the high school. And this is where the student has one or more co-taught or enrichment level classes. They may also have two or more resource room hours, and with various classes. We'll talk about that in a second. They may have that modified algebra, the special education class. They may have speech or social work several times a month. And then this column would be, and this is a conversation your parents and your teachers will have, is are we heading for a diploma, or are we doing a certificate of completion? And we don't necessarily have to worry about what the difference between each of those is at this point, but you will be involved with those conversations at the high school. What basically the big picture with this whole table is, what do you want to do after high school? You don't have to decide right now. You're like 13 or 14 years old. But we want to start thinking about that. What do we, are we thinking we want to be a Spartan? Do we want to be a Wolverine? Do we want to just jump right in the workforce? Is the military in mind? What do we don't have to decide today, but we want to start thinking about that. Okay, now here are some of the special ed classes that we have available at the high school. The first one is that academic lab class, and that is for credit, and you earn a letter grade. And the focus for that class is study skills, time management, organization, self advocacy. There is time to complete homework. There's no doubt about that, but it's always in the with the mindset that we want to improve the study skills and the time management and the organization. We want to make it so that you can succeed on your own without having an academic lab. And the way to do that is to focus on study skills, time management, organization, and self advocacy. We had talked about modified algebra a little bit. Modified algebra is for a very small selection of students for whom math has just not been their strongest subject, and students will take that over 2 years. It's a very small class size, and it's very heavily accommodated and supported. So instead of getting through Algebra 1 in 1 year, it's taken over 2 years. And that does satisfy the algebra requirement for high school. And then there's some other special ed classes, which again, these are more on the rare side. That would be on the, I guess, the right side of the column up here, and that would be for career preparation, consumer mathematics, consumer English, and this is really a lot of life skills that is happening at that level, and that is intense individual instruction for students with IEPs. Now, one of the big questions that I hear from a lot of people is, what about homework? And let's see if I can make this as big as I count, as I can. All right. I don't know if I made that big enough or not. So let's see. There we go. Homework counts as part of your grade at the high school. So homework counts always, because the homework is the practice. It's where you figure out how to do it. You get guidance from the teacher, you get guidance from your classmates, your group, from your Mrs. Clark, Mr. Longadike, Ms. Ferris. This homework counts always. At the high school, it is included in your grade. So if you skip your homework, if you don't do your homework, if you don't do great at your homework, that is reflected in your overall grade. It's different for teachers. We have some teachers where the homework counts pretty heavily, others it's not as much, but if missing assignments equals zeros, and zeros bring your grade down, and we do not want low grades. I think that's a the universal given, and so we do not want zeros lead to lower grade. There we go. Okay, so um, all right, so that is kind of the overall perspective there for what high school special education is going to be about. I know the big question is, what is our schedule going to be? What when is we going to know? By the end of this year, students should have an idea of what classes they had signed up for. If you have not yet done the Google form, uh, we recommend doing that, pretty soon here, and your case managers, Mr. Longadike, Mrs. Clark, Mrs. Ferris, will be very helpful in helping you pick which classes you want to take. So, if you have any questions, I am at the high school. My name is Mr. Ellis, Ellis. Some of you might have had Mrs. Ellis. That's my Mrs. Ellis. And anyway, so I hope that this has been sort of educational or informational. If you have any questions, check with Mr. Longendijk, Mrs. Clark, Mrs. Ferris, and we will get your question answered as soon as we can. Hope you have a phenomenal, wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.